Good morning, Genrepiche, Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe, and also Katrina, our translator, or interpreter, and to everyone who's joining us online. We are happy to be here together again, and as soon as we're seated,
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one not gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the three worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash, a lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamirya Tayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Jason.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they don't in the language. Oh, yeah, that in the cursor. Chitunga bachim besung lerwa. Le so yo a chui chuburshins, ra. Le so yo a chui chuburshins. Newton jigwe chewa tembatans. Shiwe cheso luda timashin. Karna lendre chishin. Rangbalas, rangbalas. Nyeba tembu nyene nyebe so. Tashi chawa nam japun ata. Keso tata chubarshibala tata patan de machin yilos. Le so yo a chui chuburshins. Garazu lu dan so so da. Lu sine so so buche. So si du san lu dan semni. Mandre che su ne tungege. Ngwe butelia so si gorda. Le so yo a. De yo a si du san ko medaba. Tangbu na shi tege maris ko yundu de si gorda. Yo a si de. Le so yo a. Chui chubushi te pecha ardo. Chaba tang so na. Ne sakal chuki de orwa. Nima chaba tang du san ne. Chaba ma chulu kyabionde. Bumbu de chui chubushi bubu to shunju mambu chungira ko shuk tege ani chui nalia bumbu tinde chubur sigra shunju de ko re chanya ye do do o chui chubur sigra de so yo wa chui chubur shis ni to jibe je ko yo ba jig do ge re se ko ra ngara ju lu da so kanga ba yo to jig so na lu da sem ni de kagan do sha ga so jig so na lu da sem ni kagan do sha ga re Then chiwa sigurdo. Gudun jigbe chiwa temba dance. Oh, tingarazo. Namjuneti susu ludan soti. Takpa temba rochi shibuchi yin samsa chakbuchi samlatang me sungura. Ko kechi ginjuru ne tar ludan so ni nyamdon rewa de che dugre se. Soti jig dugre sungura. Pena chu chubur na shires. Chu chubur de chabatang dusan wo de sache chu yora. Kanema chabatang de te shugi ko bumburabishi tosto ke yongurite. Ina kokora kepchen joba te shug de yason jigdura. O tina shire songudwa. So yo chu chubur shis. Ya tijilam na tu tisha kamer.
No, no. So here to begin with, as is taught by Jay Lama Tsongkhapa, this life and body that we have right now are like sort of wavering, impermanent, like a water bubble. It's something that is quickly destroyed. So we should recollect the fact that we are going to have to die. And having died, we will follow after our sort of white and black karma in the way that a shadow follows after the body. So finding stable certainty in that, it says, please bless me to accomplish all positive virtuous actions, avoid all negative actions, and always be endowed with conscientiousness or awareness. So here, as it explains in this first line, our body, the sort of form that we have, as well as our life, the kind of the conjoined body and mind, when our body and mind exist in this kind of conjoined state, that's our life. These are impermanent. They're sort of wavering, subject to, by their very nature, impermanence and disintegration. So they're sort of like water bubbles, like we can imagine when it rains and there are kind of puddles of water and more raindrops are dropping down, and it creates these little bubbles of air, or sort of bubbles on that water. They are very temporary. They sort of come up and then are dispersed very quickly. And so our body, our life are like that as well. Although we have this sort of sense that they are stable and lasting, this is actually something, as the verse continues, that is quickly destroyed. We are subject to having to die. We can't have this body forever. So death being the point at which this body and mind separate, we have to cast off this kind of life. And so again, this is describing the sort of situation that we have with this life that we have right now. Our body and our life are things that are impermanent, sort of like these little water bubbles that come up in a time where the rain is pouring down, and you can get these little sort of accumulation of bubbles, but they are going to quickly disperse. Our body too, our body and our life are something like that. We should recollect the fact that we are going to have to die.
뭐야 요소 요아 추추시 유든 집에 치와점 바나스도 어니 소되게 류다 셈미고 레지도 수내 주거래 뒤에는 너버 조선은 치와서 되는 거 알아 류다 셈 가간도 샤거도 요즘 집에 치와점 바나스 어디 양내 양도 가서 장고를 했어요 시외 지에서다 제일 가려 연구에서는 배트네 싸워네 류 균체 셈 균체 가게 맹게 작마도 류 고랑 균데 붙이야 풍부시로가 연구를 뒤균트는 그래 이 셈데야 고랑 셈 참무체 미 류레 템베 셈기 나주다 초라단 두시다 두즈강가 매샤니야 셈 고랑 세시르바 참모지 모제제가 고랑 균트는 로샤 그래서 오라 요즘 집에 쉬어지서 류도 좀 마시 가난한데 시외 지에서 류다 좀 마시 가난한데 शेष travel 이 지에서 류다 sem미가 균소소소 로샤요라 시에서 류다 좀 마시서 근데 소소 류다 류지 좀 어르지 잠나니 류지 좀 용거로 파셔도 좀나 용거로 그래서 류다 좀 마시서 류데 가만도나 때다 냠도 좀 나데 냠도 용거로 시에서 류다 좀 마시 까나게 레니부데다 소소 냠도 용거래서 거라 류다 좀 마시 까나랜데 최신 장발라서 레 카르보 케외초다 네 티페초 가르체네 띵아주 셈기 쳬바선자 셈기 텐도 네바데 테데어르노 고데네 띵아라주 냠도 겨와치마 셈데 냠도 사나 도션도 우데서 거라 까나랜데스 카르볼레 샹라 차와 빵바 로 겨와추 나불레 샹라 차와 티빵바 카르벨레 좋아 네 띵도서 겨와추 소치바 판데 소초바 세라라 마심발렘바 판 심바 동아세라 로옌 판데 치좀 소아세라다 근데 요구라 시치도 르다 좀 가나는데 최시 장발라 니바 템보니에서 어디 계시 템보니에 소소 집에 지어서야 소소다 냠도 기디길에 니부터 냠도 누구 요삼때 계시 템보니에 버쳐 그래서 거라 현다 소소 냠도 누구에서 요 말와 소소 르데 소소 셈당 소소다 카가신 로사레 아니 노론제 예니들을 써봐 강냠도 되게요 말아 당냠도 여데 가르시네 레 셈길레 개와체나 개회사베 박샤데 냠도 요라 미게레 사이네 미게레 박샤 레 기디길레 니부데 소소 냠도 도레 송고도 야
No. So here again, this life and body are impermanent, like a water bubble. They are quickly destroyed, and so we should recall death. We should think about death again and again. Again, death being that time when this body and mind that have been abiding together, those separate. And we should recall that it's not the case that after death, the continuity of the sort of form of our body is cut, or that our mental continuum is cut. The continuity of those will continue on. Our form changes state and goes this sort of separated from the mind, but the mind too will continue on. It's not the case that once we die, those continuums are cut. So here, as it continues, it says, after death, we will follow on our black and white karma, the way a shadow follows the body. So when you have, again, at the time of death and the body and mind are separated, the body, the sort of matter, will continue in its own continuum. And so too with the mind, although the more coarse sort of feelings and conceptualizations have subsided, there's that very subtle, clear light mind that is going to continue on. And the sort of after death, that mind will follow after our black and white karma, the way that the shadow follows the body. When you have the sunlight and your body and it casts a shadow, wherever your body goes, that shadow is going to follow. And so too, this mind will follow after the kind of white, those positive, good, virtuous karmas we have created, or those black, negative karmas that we have created. So if we have accumulated actions of abandoning, harming others, those sorts of positive, virtuous actions that are the opposite of the 10 non-virtuous actions. So instead of killing, we protect life, or instead of sexual misconduct, we hold to ethical conduct and so forth. If we, those are the sort of actions that will determine where we can go. So here we should find a strong kind of certainty that this is the case. After we die, there's nothing else that we can take with us. The body is separated away. We can't have that. We don't have any sort of wealth or possession that we can take with us, no family or friends or anyone else. But instead, all we have are the sort of seeds, those imprints, the latencies of those positive and negative actions that we have created in the past. And we should have strong certainty in this.
Oh yeah. Nipa tempo nyene sierra. Tele ngeshi tempo nyeba shele. Nipa tempo nyene. Nyebe so tashi chawa namja ponga tansirwa. Nakbu le degi. Ranyam do yunge nakbu le degi karchi gorsana. Miki wachu shenla tsewa. Lunga yusum yikone. Shenla tsewa cheba terwa. O di nipa cheshu degi. Nyawala kigres. Ding degi yida. Yangba degi ne. Danduli kigres. Kyu kigres wara. Ane di miki wachu di paa di doksho. Ane kia wachu di chini tuba ina. Ane lada me kia sangbu tokbure songu wara. Sa rangi maungba yungju kia di kyu di karna hagi le sangi niputi re songu wara. Nipa tembu nyene nyebe so trashi chawa na yipongda. Nyebe so di le nakbu tozu songu wara no. Shenla tsewe le nakbu le tozu kanga paa paa kurese. Nipe so tashi chawa namja ponga das. Miki wachu tashi chawa ne. Rwa kulung yanche ne pa maki wacheche pangbo tabshi chigura esi meche nal sugura. Kiso tada chubar chibala sute miki wachu di pa ne ten doso ki ke wachu di tuyeli ya besu chigura esi ura. Tashi chawa ne ponga. Kiso tada chubar. Kiso tada sute karbu le de sugura. Karbu le ke wachu la soba. Kiso tada chubar chibala, tado pagdan tenpa chingil sowa kiawa chima susu kiawa sangpo dan ngenpo topchi ki kyuti re se. O tezo kanga mikiwa chudi paa tsendili ya. Ene kiawa chudi chini ki chup. Maho bana ya kiawa ngenpa mele sangpo chi lenya ki kyuli ya tikpung kitu tsushindu chigi yinsam. Di toli ya ne kiawa thongma tsendi tsamayinpa kiawa thongma meba ne tikpa mambu sayori tezo kanga le shakpa chen gyosimche. Cha sawa ta cheba piwa tongsha dambala soba o tendre chagore songudwa ya.
So finding strong certainty in that we are going to follow after our kind of black and white karmas. The verse continues saying that we should then abandon even the most kind of subtle of faults. So anything on the 10 non-virtues, anything that causes harm to others with our body, speech, and mind, the sort of most heavy actions leading to a birth, negative actions leading to a birth in the hell realms, the sort of medium leading to a birth as a hungry ghost, and the sort of lighter leading to a birth as an animal. Instead, we should be accumulating all positive actions, the kind of opposite of those 10 non-virtues, recognizing that the future life that we take, again, if we find this kind of stable ascertainment or certainty that this is what our future rebirth, the life we are going to take is dependent upon, then we will really make effort to abandon even the most subtle kind of negative actions or faulty actions from the very intention to cause harm to another, and will make effort to accumulate all kinds of virtuous actions, those white or those positive sorts of actions of the 10 non-virtues, the 10 virtues and so forth. So here we're saying in this verse, expressing in this verse, the desire to always have kind of conscientiousness or awareness, to avoid any sort of negative actions from the very smallest ones, and to make that kind of effort to accomplish those positive actions that will lead to a good rebirth rebirth in the future. And along with this, we should have the recognition that since we have taken countless rebirths in the past, we have so too accumulated many previous non-virtuous actions, and taking the time to generate a kind of regret for those actions and engage in purification, along with the sort of practices of accumulating virtue through things like prostrations and offerings and so forth. This is the way in which we use this kind of recognition of death and impermanence, along with the sort of certainty in karma, to really make an effort at these actions.
Oh yeah, ko ta do pa dan dem ba chen ji lob sung do. Oh dene tu ta do me chi dina so so ni ma ta ba ri sung yor do. Pa ye dan dem ba chen ji lob se de. Pa ye ba se de sa. Oh te zo me ge cha wa shan la cha wa la so ba tu cha me ro a sam. Ke wa do tu ku ye sam che. Sab sab che che. Pa ye ba ro. Lang do che o di rung ma re di rung ge sam sa sab so che ne ne. Tende song tong ge chi le. Nga gyur chi nyam do. Tende gyur wa ane lamba sanje chanchu semba la so ba te da ga chin ji lob shi se. Ya che nyam ba le tende tende gyur chi chin ji lob shi se. Tamba sanje chum den de ka le te ba che ne tende chi gyur chi sam ko re song do. Na
So then this verse ends with saying, please bless me to always have conscientiousness, this kind of awareness on a daily basis, being aware of the kinds of actions that we are engaging in. This kind of a conscientiousness is knowing what is a not suitable action, what is a suitable action, having in one's mind what is, and being careful of with respect to the kinds of things that we should adopt, that we should put into practice, and those things that we should avoid. And so here, by listening to the teachings, we should be requesting, may I have the blessings to create that kind of transformation wherein I have this sort of awareness. By listening to the teachings, may I be able to practice this on a regular basis.
oh yeah. Oh di de ko me ge du so ya. Oh yeah, me ge wa chu pa. Ge wa chu tu ge wa chu tu ye de. Debu na mi gin debu se da. Debu che shu de number me ba ma ba ne gyun de ba de. Ane nge song song da la da mi ke wa la so ba yung go no ki ti gi le ni. Ina chen de li ya so so tan da che go ra. So che ba pa ma chin ba lim ba pa lo yin pa chen ba tham ma pa chu zu pa te zu pa pa ba yin so so le chen de li ki ba yo no. Na nang mi so yin da ka ga de nyok da nyu nyu che che mi sang bo chi che che mi si ke tu go ra. Ti che ne so so chen de li ya cha do da nga ye dan zhen sim da tin de ke ku yo ma ra. Su su me chi de so so ya bo chi ke chu den de ba chi ke yo ra. Tin de ko pen do de chen de le yo ra do. Ra le pen go re shen le pen go re. Ina debu number me ba de ma ho ba le go re so go ra. O ti indu kar so re. Kyo chima chikbu tondal na mi yin debu zo de chima de re ma do. Tanda ya so so le de tanda chen de le sa ko de sa ge yo ra. Chen de le sa de za ra ge lu nga ye sung ko ne kyo do pa kyo do tu de ye na. So so ki ba re nang mi de ka ga chi zo nyam do ro di che de ka ga ya te chi ki ba sho yung go do. So so se me le le se te sho go do. O ti so da 내가 되어 푸수 펜바세 그봐 담배신에 토마르케와 파토케와 토마르케와 세아나시 담본 고촌 메시델레 펜그레 게이케와 제마티 튠튠에 펜그레세 어디 송구도 야
So here, the practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtues and adopting virtuous actions, doing things like these will bring about their kind of ripening results in our future lives. So by avoiding killing and sexual misconduct and stealing and lying and so forth, we are creating the kind of causes for a good ripening result of a rebirth as a human or a god in the future. future. But even aside from that, those kinds of results that will come in the future, even in this life, we will be much happier if we put these kinds of things into practice. If we are not driven in our motivations by jealousy and pride and anger and so forth, this is going to allow us to be happier right now in the temporary, like in the short term. Whereas the ripening result will sort of, that's the main thing that maybe we're focused on in terms of our practice. We should also recognize that getting rid of those kinds of faults of body, speech, and mind, that's something that will bring benefit. It said that, you know, bringing a sort of temporary benefit as well as that kind of long-term sort of benefit. So here, the Dharma is often explained as being virtuous at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so here, again, even if our focus is on the kind of ripening results that practice will bring, this abandoning non-virtue will bring us happiness in this life as well. We'll be able to be more peaceful and harmonious and so forth with those around us.
No, that and that. So message get on the lab to our church. Chua, do talk to Tangi Mares, so that social leader, so to the Jew to race the Shinaku Mara. That's so Jibachi the Kira, share some to the Made de Yungur, the Toma de Yungurua. In a Jibaku and Dalia, share your mother. Roa. Send the message get on Kilo to check in any other around the shell, Pendo, or send it a Jimano's Pendo, or rest, share your no. So message get on it. This shit is a co Shinako et and Mare. Kirevangonian as a Hako de Udo. So the message to talk to do stay Maro te Hakodera. So the Pame Pama Miranga do Shima Yungu, which is doing some red door. The Shinaki Martin when they sitira. Which is a co Jipa Kashayan Shiva that in the Kajishana Milishana Gungerish to go Sigdoa. Chidanda Sulas. She was a tradit so Takira Shirisana, Sabatevi Omar, T. Samtadi Miki by Ungurishara. Ina could do Comsona. Tuta to Tange me some Namitsuna Tagbarish do stay me some Imagika, Dre, Sabrene Chamba, the Yaga Yungura. Tuta to do Stange me some Karsoda. Or Tico. Kaka Dre, some the Tezir in Galia, which it said the Coco Yara. Peduste Martas, Teziringat Sawa Pemba to Yabuja Timbuchetes, Imagine Kaka Dueta, Church of Ravas, Oh, Tindico, Jipapae Tondalia, Dr. Tange Maritas, Duba Metavaritas, Sakwa Metavaritas, So Metavaritas, Lochunju de Metavarita, and Ruditas, the shitty, or Mount Bonnet and written Urea someday. So simply you are no. So simply you are no. Oh, do Carsoda. Pechena Yungda, Shunjutuna, Kala Chu Yamsimba, Kala Never Yuba. Then in Jigba Yonda, the Chidala, Kala Juse. Or Tender Samuel Konga Media, 2000 Tange Mare, some Namina Kanga, this Medabara Juacha, some Nena. Hearing with some Tantum Vijena. And they call Message the Yamuji Kegra. Shala Swa Pachini, Temba to Namine and Gotu Samalia, Tendesi Messikeduza. And the call Jigme go by Chagre, Shanda the college, Chidala, Shiwali, Jigma de Shara. Come Messi Yamuji Kere, some good Ata Messi Yamuji Kere, Tigba Sam, Kawa Yamutu Choso, Tan degree some Chidan commercial Missuji Tag Yomara, Koran Shirva Tilico, Jag Yomara, Tanda Coco Desiringa, Sudab Yomara. So con Jigba Meva Chagara, Lord Debocha, Roa, not Angiba Mesam, Messilia Tibashida Sam Mesam, Kawachini Restoration some, or Tiding as a Pichana Yudo, Shiva Rabdi Shivala Kas, Shita can go Chasuna Shivala Kasser, Rabdi Giba Mebata, Shivala Sena Meba, Giba Meba, Messi Abushi Kerry, and Namitsu the Yamdu in and Chisoli in and Abushi Kerry, some day, similar Yavara Mebashi, Tabushi share your door, Dosha your door. What the man at Taisho, oh yeah, what is to the Anderson? Manda Songato.
No.
Yeah.
So here, the reason for discussing and talking about the fact that one will not remain forever. Now, some thinking about this way in which we take birth and we have to die and so forth, might think that it is to make one afraid or to make you sort of scared. But really, it's not about creating fear in one. Rather, it's in order to appreciate the kind of life that we have now, by thinking about the sort of impermanence, the fact that we aren't going to remain forever, it makes us act in ways that are beneficial both to ourselves and to others. So here, it's not, of course, when we bring up the kind of word death or the concept of death, there's some sort of unhappiness that arises in our mind that we have to separate from this body and so forth. And so this is something that, however, we can see death around us directly. Like we can see that no generations of our family from the past remain. Everybody has to face this kind of fact of death. And so there are, again, some that when they hear these teachings, they sort of feel sort of discomfort at hearing about death. But when we recognize that we are not going to remain forever, of course, there's going to be some sort of sense of unhappiness, but it also leads us to make good use of the kind of life that we have, to be more loving and to generate more positive attitudes and so forth. We think, well, I need to do the Dharma right now while I have this kind of opportunity. And so it is by thinking about impermanence and death and the fact that our life will not remain forever that can kind of create a change in our mind. When we are able to recognize that we are impermanent, that we are not going to remain forever, then we will use our life in a sort of positive way. We will value that and take advantage of it in a way that when we get to the point of death, then one doesn't have to feel that kind of fear. If you have throughout your life acted in a way where you know that you have avoided negative actions for the most part, you have tried to accumulate positive actions, then at that time of death, you don't have to have that kind of fear or regret or trepidation. So reflecting upon death and impermanence during one's life can help make it more meaningful and also create the kind of change that allows one to be at peace at death. It is said that of the sort of very best practitioners actually feel a joy at the time of death. The sort of middling practitioners can die without regret, thinking like, I have done well throughout my life. And at the very least, someone can die without a sense of fear, knowing that they have used their life in a kind of meaningful way. So again, talking about death and impermanence is not to create fear or scare you, but rather to actually alleviate that at the actual time of death.
No, that interest some done. Junako Ringbo Kiwa Chima interest some Latande. So Buddha Kagan to do it. Tanga Mava Shagi Samsan Jigba Dungu Marwa, Ta Cheben Jigba Sigra. A Mava Shagi some Jigi or Ramancha. Mava Shagi Mare. Lutan Simkin Drawach and the Simdi Tramocha Kiwala and Chimandosha Yora. The Kokiwana Kiwama Yaketane, Yadre do some Sambachi. Chidu Tanga Mava Shagi Samsa Samli Ongo Mare. Chima de Yabuji language Mabata, T. Samko Gyoto. Sakoti Ta Cheben Jipa, Kunchi and Louis Samson Chiba Yongo Mare. Kiwachima de Karche on some Titolia, Juna da Carsore Subsochi with the Samko Mato. No, Roa. Or do Carsore. Chukelian Kiwachima Yoba the Kelling Geshena, T. Samlu Yordo. That case Kiwachima Drea Maru Samba Inea. Didn't want to lose on some Yakagachi machine. Ludi Janjan let us some the only Ludi there let do Tachima Dongesu or some Tangiora or Dico Joachima Malingajina. Shala saw upon Pembatu, now meeting Yamdo Tungure, Chizos and Yamdo Tungur Messicura. Tambachi Gogo Tam, the Shala saw Machimbalin Kanjamajuchen, Messikiwa Yomarwa. The Joachima Malinaya. Messidi, Shala saw upon Becone Chini Pembatu, Messidi Yaru Sunday Chikavina, Cochuke Malinet, and that surely door. Children Chuma in Banyan surely door. A Koran going as she use some Kemalina. May some train your mother, never touch you your mother. You ever do not under Ichi Mason at Dembarwa. May resident, may country Hakosone. Meba ke hako yomara, she yomara, tanda tongu yomara mado, matonchina meba michera. Ming misewa, pena ming misewa, tua chungu metonshi chera. Mi seba mene tua chunju jine tongu medwa, chida yora, ko tongu yomara. Ta ko tua mindu se ta che show mara. Kura matonga mato che. Tindi ko, kyo chima yoba hama gunga cho, kyo chima yoba li chime. Right? Meva race is a meva leachi on Margo. Yeba Hamaguza, Yeba Lichi Messoda, Meva machines and Meva leachi to Eke Omara, or Tinducar soda. Tinder some going a shit on shoot, Tinder Camelinga. Oh, Tipun Kituti, Yahucha Chevenes, Susan Bessie, Yagata shoot and I'll shoot at the Ordo. Oh, Tinducar soda. Oh, teni kyo chima sangbu kyo yangbu che dunya ka samlu ta. Te tsam mayimba, nge son le tarwa tsam mayimba. Eni, lada mi kyo tiya dunga jirang shin chen yin sam. Chuna, koya le tarwa che goyo. Koya dunga le tarwa che goyo. Rwa, koya dunga sin karsi urasne, nyamu goyo chakdang kyo wangi le sa. Eni di wangi kyo lang, yang pungbu dor che, kichi che goyo. Rāna rāwa mēba che, sosu le ngenpa sa, kiwa sa kari yu ne, tiwa ki rāwa mēba kichi che kwa, pungpu ndōlen che kwa ba. Mi pungpu rashi la yāng di sha, yāng tendu che, yāng tu tu dre, tila kora si kwa ra, dunga si, kwa dunga ki rāng shi che re si. O tile tarwa che kwa yu sam, tile taya tundal ya, ne, seba pang kwa yor tong. Shenda kaji she du zan, tso seba she kira. Sedang trela yang si mechara. Seba de da tresna ni yang seba lenya yomare. Karisne seba geba seba kuba lemba seguba. Seba de mene chagba yomare. Chakshin de mene kondu yomare. Chagdangi pandu yore. Dichane seba pangure esine digora. Seba pangi yesam chakshin de ngazu konzu se chagdangi ku se chagdan de nyuru tanya de tarwa toya lamdu gorda. Tā tī tāliyā chīnshana chādā yōngsā de kārasana tī tāngzīngi yōngrēs nē dāngmē sēde dāngmē bā tōkwa, tōngba nī tōkwa sēde yōngwārdā o tī yīndi sēbā pāngu yōsam sēbē yūdē nē tādun zīmbā tēde ngā sam rāngwā yōban zīmbā tī ngā zīndi pāngu yōsam rō dāngmē tōne o tī ndē chīni thārwa tōba chāgu yōsam rā chīkbu thārwa tōna dhīgmā rēsam shēn pāma chōmbē rō simjēn shēn rāndāng tsungpa tewa ndolo tunga mendo ware te tsangma rangi rangwe ne rwa soso ngwe ne shenliya pando che tumkwe che che kore samche ane te tunda liya rangi tanda ne seba pang kautuk kondro pang kautuk che chakdangi budarwa ane tangzingi se nga som shibu che yana shaya te pa chungru tang o tinte che ne rimgi ne tarwa toba cha kuyo sam shenya Tī tundaliyā rāng kyun kunse, yandē kundē shingyo, tānda kē rāng tupkuyo mara. Māng bākale kyab che lāng dur ki nē sāngma shingē, rwa kyun sāngma tēngē, o sāngye yu kōpāng tōpa chāgu rāng, tunda sāngbu thār chimba, shēnyu thār chimba kāsā ching gyur sō na, anē shēng liyā pēmbā lap chimbu tup tu ure, ngē tundē chi che guyo sam, o tī che do anē chū nyēngi yin sam che, rwa, o anē kulung, chūne chāngchū sēmo sēmchē tamchē tāmbu ngē sōng lā mā jīwa chīg yīn, lādā mī kōpā tōwa chīg yīn, lādā mī kōpā tī tēng liyā, anī tēsā mā yīmbā thārwa chūk yīn, chakdāng pāngchē thārwa chūk yīn, thārwa rāng chīk bū tūngē lē thāwa mā yīmbā, sēmchē shēng tamchē kē tūngē lē thāwa chīk tūngē chīg yīn, tī chī tū nē sāngchē jī kōpā tōwa chā, tī chī tū chū yīn yīn sōm, kūlū sētam lē sāmbar shū sō rē, tīndē sō. Āyā.
So here, by thinking in this way, reflecting upon the way in which we take birth, now some might have this kind of fear that arises from identifying maybe the self as being like the body. And so they feel like when they cast off their body or at death, they are going to become sort of non-existent. There's that kind of fear that can arise of the annihilation of the self. But if we don't have, if we have that kind of sense that there are past and future lives, that we are going to not be sort of ended at the time of death, but rather that we have to continue on, then our concern becomes about where we will be taking rebirth. And so here, this is really where that sort of transformation takes place. You don't have a fear at the kind of ending of the self, but rather, where will I take rebirth, and what will come in the future? And so here, this is in this way, there are those who, though, even if one doesn't accept past and future lives, by sort of acting in a way wherein they are getting rid of those kinds of negative actions, those non-virtuous actions, they can benefit themselves in just this very life. If we act in a way in which we are trying to get what we need through cheating others, lying to them, stealing from them, deceiving them, and so forth, we're not going to be happy even in this life. But someone who maybe they don't have full confidence in future lives, maybe they don't necessarily believe they're totally non-existent, but they're just not sure, like, well, is there a future life? They will be benefited in this very life by getting rid of those kinds of negative actions, as well as in their sort of future life. So here, our actions can become dharma if we act well based upon that kind of sense of wanting to get good results in the future. But even if we're not sort of sure about that, again, not being able to perceive something is not perceiving its non-existence. So for those who are not, we can't directly see our future lives. And so for some, that becomes a sort of point of contention. Are there going to be future lives? But even if they aren't sure, acting in a way that is in accordance with Dharma will bring good results in the temporary as well as in the longer term. And so here, we should think in this way that we're going to practice the Dharma, recognizing again that we are impermanent, and wanting to avoid those kinds of negative results, but not just wanting to be freed from the lower realms. We also come to recognize that we want to get out of this cycle of taking up and casting off these aggregates, being driven by our karma and afflictions and this kind of uncontrolled cycle of rebirth. We'd rather get free of that kind of cycle of suffering. And this really involves attaining a kind of exhaustion of craving, getting rid of our attachment and hatred, and getting rid of, in the sort of 12 links of dependent origination, there's particularly that link, the 8th link of craving, and then the 9th of taking. So when we sort of are lacking the causes for continued rebirth, we're able to have an extinction of all of our suffering. So by abandoning the kind of sense of self and other that is based upon this strong holding to a self, holding to an I, and the kind of attachment and hatred that comes from that, by realizing the opposite of that, by realizing selflessness, by coming to understand emptiness, we can achieve a freedom from this kind of uncontrolled rebirth. So getting rid of that grasping at a self allows us to attain a kind of liberation. But we also reflect that that's not itself sufficient, because we look around at all other sentient beings who have acted as our mothers and fathers and see that from my own side, I want to be able to help these other sentient beings be able to achieve the same kind of liberation, to get rid of their attachment and anger that comes from this grasping at a self. And so therefore, I'm going to strive to attain this state of Buddhahood, a state in which one has freed oneself from all faults and attained all good qualities and has complete knowledge of all of the points to be adopted and abandoned. And in order to do that, I need to listen to the Dharma. And so thinking in this way, generating a kind of bodhicitta motivation, building up through these stages of thinking about rebirth in the lower realms, as well as one's own liberation, and extending then to the liberation of all sentient beings, being able to attain a state in which you have the ability to fully benefit other sentient beings. We should think in this way and set a proper motivation for listening to the Dharma.
Oh yeah, kese chetinimba, duche tendre setimba, duche tendre stinema. Dan duche pachane share yorda. Oh, salu jangba tabuse, drag ne jangba tabuse, dressing jangba tabuse ora. Sunday shana so telepechane share na dendre resera, dedas. Dunji jangba des, taso singari stalu, want to tan jangba, was a shake de ora. Duji Jangbadi, Juji Mebar, Ge Mares, Juji Mebar Genani, the Gavanda Savenalia, Deshin Yabuke Davanashi, Satramos, the bird of Tezole, Deshin Kigurati, Kigiomara. Kumeba Kigine, you do Tamje de Gene, Lumba Chili Kene, Lumba Kangali Kegure, Deshin the Kagali Kivanashi, Satombu Kari, Yusal and Deshin Kigurti Kigumara. You do Tamjeto. Do you chili kena, Sawa you do kena, Gunga Kegura, or Tinduko, do Gashili King Gashila Magi, Yungashi Lumba Kashili King, Lumba Kashili King Meduna, Korenga Kewasagora, you Kasha Kashaliki, Kasha Kashal Make, Tizu Kasha Kashaliki, Kasha Kashal Makena, Ko Jessa de Karchan Kigure, Magesa de Karchan Magi Resinata, Ko Junisha and Madoshe Omarwa, Ranga Kewasonza, and it Kujin Yore Sigora. Kujin Mana usually can a Tamjal Kiore, usually can a Tamjal Kiore. Gashel King Gashel make you the Kusan Karas Trinita Goshe Omaro, Deli Gusans and Kevere, Deli Gumasans and Maki Restisha Ora. Oh, tea. That to do Jagalia, Cumile Kevasarva, and the Tagbe Julie Kevasar to the Mambo Yora, or Tesons and Tender Mares, Sanjay Suet and Dalia, Salujan Bendotos Natus Songiordo. Tinashin de Shavior. Two Tamje do Kewams, two Chili Kena, two Tamje. Yana, you do Tamje do. Namia Kewa Mebandu, Yana, you never Kigane, Yana, you not do. You should do Lumbarwa, you should do Ra. Teda Maimba Renga Kewa in Besse. Sama Renga Kewa, two Kashel Ke Kashel Makere. Lumba Kashel Ke Kashel Makero. Kiena ko Renga Ke Renga Magir. Kabri Ke Kabri Makera de Dura. Kimbe. Jangba de la Juva Tacho Saresere, you never kill him but to Digmarese, no condition at you or Resungora. Rangi Jujinji dosun Jamba Wember Misever Yevan Dunayas. That Transemba to the right to do Jagality to the Tarch, Tanda Yorto, Kebamabu or the Tarchambure. He is a number Chevina. Kui dosun Jebu Yoni Kig Marese were. The conso de Penangazo Yungari or Numsia Yungar, Yungar tells Sigra, tell the Nalnum Yore said the Yore. No man, Jama tells sin any num condition good as over. Kuitus Mave and Jabuchi care your marese. Ki Yunani Chematsir and Num Kigoduase, can Chematsir and Num care your mara. Tell the Drugudis and Num care yora. Kuitus Mave say your mara, some Kuitus your esse. Musum to say to Madu Keverse Remado. Kuitus Mave and Drew your mara, some Kuitus Yangasere. Oh, Tende some Gordo. De Mare Songora. Then I consider Woman Negaso, Shua Yosedera, Mara Yosedera. Then they showed the Mare, Kuchi de Yor, but in Juni Shongone Rego Amado, Tanda Shongone Reo Marwa, Marungone Reo Marwa. Then the Koranti reaction do something detail, Kuitus Yose Shara, in the Mares, Kuitus even W. Mares. Takis of Duate, Kui Tangi to debut Tangi Unikiwas. Dale Kiawa said Tisura. Rangi Juji, Number Misevesi, Tandang number says the Tandang Musum to Tungumare, Tina Num Yore, Omenalia Show Yore, Omenali Chura Yore, Tara Yore, Tandang Musum to say your mother Yore, so number Mesevas, Musum Resevich and Tungu Mare. Ah, Cheers when it serves on any Musum Savage at Tungu, yet the Guinea Yore Sigura. You do some about Meseva Yevan Donaya. Then it do there in Jambarani. Do do so Pa Jamba Shantamni to do Nevayan any Jamba ko Kesarwa. Kesarani, Anga Joe Medo Asore. Laran Kawatan made a Yuvisher says, you know. Tali Kiwa Tali Kenny Kutus, Yanga Kikokagura, Laran Kekugara, or Tende Kiomars. Jambarani Kid Yokobe. Mobo Kid Yokobe. Kid Yokobe Tedana, Rangi Kujingi Laran Ki. kebar che me go se kyu to su yo na ni kyu jing la ya chi kebar che ko ma re cha ra salu jangba de rang ge kyu jing kyu che ne ta ya salu jangba de rang ge nyelen ge kyu da ken len ji chi ge to zu ba kyu che ne kyu che be che le ya lo bur ya chi ke ando tin re yo ma re so ra kyu din gyur gen gyur sa re ji tab yu na sa ben din gyur gen gyur che ni nyelen de ki nyen de de ngo gyur ko ra 시베스기 견나네 가서다 규규 채널와 규 규년랭기 규득이 규 규니 깨고라 띵 규르긴 규르기 전 레부디 깨고라 년랭기 규디 규체 매베체서야 포루시 시마 깨는데 근데 요 말을 거라 규체네 규 규레 셴도 라완도 두베 수기 깨나네 규단 레메지 깨고 아니 규단 저만게 깨고 그래서 주탐들 살류 장밖에 오여 봤다는 재미식 기구나 아니 교인제 선물 살류 장밖에 해서 매래 살류 장밖에 해서 봐 사kam불에 살류 장밖에 해서 어떤 데 시작을 했은 거다 야 시겨 야 this teacher
So here, picking up in the text from where we had left off last time, in the English translation, it's on page 18, beginning with the dependent arising of composite phenomena. So here, the Rice Seedling Sutra explains the dependent arising of a composite phenomenon by using a rice seedling as an illustration. And so if a rice seedling were produced without any causes or conditions, it would have to be produced constantly in all places, or it would never be produced anywhere at any time. So here again, using putting forth the example of a rice seedling, if it is the case that a rice seedling arises without any causes or conditions, then it would have to be able to, it would sort of be produced in all places at all times. So it wouldn't be necessary to have the cause of the proper soil. You would be able to get a rice seedling from planting a seed on a snow mountain, or it would not be necessary to plant such that you give rise to the fruits in summer. It would be viable to do so in winter as well, because if something is causeless, then it would need to arise in all places at all times. If something arises only occasionally, given that there's like a certain place or a certain time, that means that it is dependent upon causes and conditions. If something doesn't, the opposite of that being that if something were to arise causelessly, then it would be produced at all times in all places, or never anywhere at all. Instead, it is sometimes produced and sometimes not produced, so we can establish that it has causes and conditions. Then continuing, some might assert, as did some Indian philosophers, particularly like the Samkhya school, that the seedling already exists at the time of its causes and conditions, and that it is simply not yet manifest. So here, again, refuting the kind of philosophical schools that would assert a causeless production, or the production from the sort of intent or thought of a creator, and so forth. Here, it's decisive that because things arise occasionally, only in some places and at some times, then they must have causes and conditions. That establishes their causality. So going to those sorts of schools that do assert some kind of causality, the Samkhya would say that things are sort of self-arisen, that actually the result, the seedling, exists at the time of the cause, the seed, and that so the seedling already exists at the time of its causes and conditions, and that it is simply not yet manifest. So here, this is the Samkhya's use the classic sort of example of like a mustard seed. They say that that the oil that you can get out of that must already exist at the time of the cause. Otherwise, it would. How could it come about when you say squeeze that in order to get the oil out of that mustard seed? And so this sort of leads to absurd conclusions to say that the effect is already existent at the time of the cause, just in an unmanifest sort of form. Buddha Buddhists would maybe come back with, well, then is it the case that, and Samkhyas would accept that, say, yogurt and butter exist in that milk? If you have milk that has the ability to give rise to those things, those sorts of results already have to be there. They already have to exist at this time of the cause. So this is the kind of position of self-production. And so here, the problem that arises, as Buddhapalita has put forth, that if something is self-produced, or if the effect already exists at the time of the cause, then its production again would be senseless. So here, but if the seedling had already been produced and existed at that time, at the time of the cause, then it would be unnecessary for it to be produced yet again by its causes and conditions. So here it's not the case that it's viable to say that the result already exists at the time of the cause, because then why does it need to be produced? Its production becomes senseless, becomes meaningless. On the other hand, if we postulate that the seedling's causal continuum is somehow broken and that it is produced from something other than its causal continuum, the effect, the seedling, would have to be independent of causes. So if you say then, instead, that like if you have the seed and the continuum of that seed or that substantial cause is somehow cut, and then that leads to the result, that too is not a viable kind of an option, because then there would be no connection between the cause and the result. So you could have, because those continuums would be cut, anything could produce anything. Fire could produce a rice seedling. A dry ground could produce a rice seedling. So here, this again, as it would be produced without any relationship to its causes and conditions, anything would be able to produce it.
Oh yeah. Chame ji jibudan sigdo tadi mambudo so. Chasan chiju menga kora chik jangja roba suchi mogonge. Roba tunda jine tu shenda roba chi me kora chik jangja yiba. Tunda sigora ta chame sera chi chame se chame mambu kelingra. Kaga tubda tidu sanje shube kablia yewe tubda shenda tili chame mambu kelingre. Unda namba chani chame che yo mardo. Chame ji chibu se. Gyurmi ji takwa se. Gyurmi takwa mambu keligre. Ta takwa se erwa chiso, tangbi kyu chiso de takwa inge se. Tele gyu yo mara se erwa tende kelingra. Gyurmi ji takwa tazo. Tsaye ji rangwa chen so. Tsaye ji rangwa chen. Rangya tube tsayu se erwa tende keling sigyo no. Oma tenyo lo sheni cho tamche tayo yin sigura. Tsayu yo mara tayo yin shenda chile tenne eni mingpa taane te yinba yinma yingi tanya shaakure sigura. Tsayu ji rangwa chen ji taala sokpa laa se. Ta takbe gyu kaan yina, tu takba yina, ra kari yina, chiso takba yin, tangbe gyu chiso yin, te taal, tele gyu me sigura. Chezan nangba chene rigyo mara. Dikke be shir, dikke sigura. Gyu koran de gyu yingi keba sonzane, gyu degi drebu shenda ke tokure sigura. Gyu koran gyu yin shenda wangi keba mayina takba yina, ene kon drebu chawa cheye ke yo mara, ene drebu ndamenda ke tobe yo mara si. Ti sigura. Drebu ke we chawa mirung we se. Gyu takba lirwa. Mirung we salu jangba de gyu teta le ke wara mirung yansi. Takbe gyu kaan le jang ke warung mara. Kare chani kigresne, gyu kare le kigresne, keji ki gyurwa dan dembe. Ducha samande keji le gyundu yore. Marazo majur je sosu tara jine rangi sate, nima yebe tanda yebe de mahamba tengi sundu surgudwa. Tende marwa ko, ti ina ane chunju kange lo, chi nyi suma ame kokwa na yunge tezu nganzu tanda yebe kuri ti yo marwa. Bu chunju te se lo ya le tu sa, ngoma shimbu chagudwa. Nime de tante devene ngoshe kura. So pen yurgun yugu che dugu yara. Lo da lo yurgu yara. Lo chu na yugu na lo nga na yugu ra. Lo nga na yugu ni de shekan yugu re. Na yurgu. Nima re ne yugu. Nima re yugu ne keji re ne yugu ne ko. Yudan kengi ke dengi jan rwa. Kendi ko yura che gu yara. Keji ke yura dan dembe. Cha doma chen gese. Cha mambu yungen. Yuwa shengen. Tutup tinjungi gyu ngoboles chichile to tenge ro tenjin debar juwa yingen gyu koran o tele tene ni debu kun jurdo cheni debu damma da kigre sora Kiwa Rome, Salu Jangba, Son Debungo Namne Loyo, some Jigden Yonso, Chebe, Tabu Mebe Kenle Kiwadas. The Gujin Sanson and Koki with a Matsana, and the Shendaji Jigden Cheba Bonjula saw what Kik with some Kigmaris and Magic with some Gujin Sanson came with us. You are maybe can't let any chance start as a Mamushes material. Tabu maybe can't let Tabusine, Malik Suto, Jigden Cheba, but the Malik said Kavayana, Malik sir, Malik Marzi has. Yagate Chochine Havura. Two days chosen, Malik Marzi say, Sutovache, Pengitwa. Kunjo Koran, Devades, Chesserch. Sabeda Chuda Treasury, so Aleta Madam. Sabeda Chuda Treasury, Kujin, Dube Tokwa Teni Rank Debu Kiva, Timbe, and Nuba Chen, Keji Nashinam Kone, Kujin said, Ora Kujin Mambuch, Nelenda Lenji, came Mambuch saw, the soon Euro was a chair. They Kone going to Debu the Kiva Chosia, never have pen any Debu the Kiva, they said. Jun Eurochi, Majev said, Takwaji Deshan and Debu Kia Marto. Kone going to Jura than Drevale. Debuke Shiva Himbe, Keshil and Juro Meshebana, Keshil and Joa Meshebana, and Juro gave it to draw score, Juro Nasa Chulu, Tonto Tapshana, Conjuara, and Debuka, Pento was chosen to any Gucci or no. Jura Meshebana, Juro Chua, debuted and they gave it to Medro, debuted and Jurujua Mesido, stat and or Juta was Sigmare. Judy Jebuti Kyoda Timbe, Judo Shenani, Jude Guru Jebuki or Sheto, Yatibatachi.
So here it continues in the text saying that nothing that is indivisibly unitary, unchangeably permanent, and substantially independent can give rise to an effect. So here there are those kinds of Indian philosophical schools that assert things that are partless, whether that is a self that is partless or like particles or time, moments of time. There are those Indian philosophical schools that assert things that are partless, unitary. For Buddhists, there's nothing that is partless. Anything that is a thing, that is a knowable object, has to have parts. So here it continues by saying that thus causes with such characteristics as being indivisibly unitary, unchangeably permanent, and substantially independent can give rise to an effect. So causes with such characteristics cannot produce a rice seedling. So something, again, and there are Indian philosophical schools that assert things that are permanent, that are unchanging, that have this kind of existence that is self-sufficient and substantially existent, as opposed to the kind of existence of being merely imputedly existent, not having any kind of substantial existence, as is posited by the Madhyamakas and the Prasangika school in particular. But for the Samkhyas, something like this sort of principle, this sort of underlying reality is something that is itself permanent. It acts as the cause for all of these impermanent things. But Buddhists would assert that no, it's not possible for something that is itself permanent to act as the cause of a particular result, particularly an impermanent result. So instead, the seedling must be produced from a cause that is a composite thing, that is composed of parts, is dependently arisen, has multiple parts, and changes every moment. So again, as we've discussed much in the past, therefore, as we will investigate in more detail in the next chapter, there can be no master of the world, no divine creator who creates the world merely by thinking it. The world is definitely created from causes and conditions. So already, and again, there are in India and other places where they sort of think of like, oh, well, what's going to happen to me after death is dependent upon what this God desires. Like they're sort of going to decide where I go. Again, that's not something can be asserted to be a cause in this sort of understanding of Buddhists. It is instead, again, an assemblage of causes and conditions, such as a seed, water, fertilizer, warmth, and moisture that produces the seedling. This assemblage carries a capacity that corresponds with the production of its effect and is connected to the effect, the seedling, through a gradual transformation moment by moment. So it is impossible for this seedling to arise from a cause that does not itself undergo momentary change, or without this process of change contributing to the production of the effect. So again, it is the case that we have this kind of sense that we are not momentary, that we remain, like what the person who was here yesterday was here the day before, and so forth. But if we look at this, if we examine, like, do we have the same sort of minds that we had when we were in our mother's womb, or even when we were very small children? We can't even hardly recognize those. We see, like, sort of over the period of, say, 10 years, we can notice, oh, a change happened in those 10 years. Well, if a change happened in 10 years, then a change must have happened in 5 years. A change must have happened in 2 years. A change, and we go smaller and smaller until we realize that everything has to be momentary. Nothing can be static and remaining for any moment in order for it to be efficacious, in order for it to be able to bring about results. So the causes of something that is impermanent and momentary themselves need to be constantly undergoing this sort of process of change. So here again, it is only when the sort of substantial cause and all the coordinating conditions come together that there's the ability to bring forth an effect. We can see that effects arise from their various causes that are in this way, again, not partless, having parts, are impermanent and are not substantially existent.
Oh yeah. Juni, Juni Rangi debut Tani, Tumbam Tobe Chetu Yenlase. Kuse de Kon Debuti Ranshi de Debuti Tobe Chetu Kuse Yadeshara. Jurangi Jure Jutinitus, Kunielingi Kushora, Nielin Sabin de Stavno Sabin de Rangi Jurani Jurochene, Ti Jundi Lesigora. Drag Sabin Rizmata Vina Sabin de Jurocheti, Kunlitan and Yumbuki or Mato. Shendaki Kisuyo Marto, Nielin di Socenera. Rangi Jurue Kutingido, Rani Nielin Rani Jurue, Kusam Kutinile, and Debudi, Ninde di Jungures Wara. Debu Jungale Shendo Kun Debu, Kive Melase. Oh, still a Shendo, Debu Kun Debu Kive Suyomar, Nielin di Kuti Ngorva Jurchune, Lengis into the Telerobachigoto. Nielesene. Deputy Ngo Gundung get the Kudele Nelesida, New Lemba, Deputy Linge, Rendung get this one. Changes against the Nelentile, Nyamdo Robachinge. Want to pen a Sabiris Mata, and then shoot out Luda, Truda, La Soba, to the share Salembala Sobatezo, changes again to order. The Nelengi Kun Tingilia, changes again to a torch and Nelengi Kun Tingile, and then Yende Yongo Resiguara. Oh, Debu Jole, Rangin Jurwe, Q Tingidos, Rangin Jurwe, Q Tingido, Debu Jole Shendo, Q Debu, give it Sushan Melas, Q Chakaya, Manju and Debu or Sempamedes, Q Chatin Jurachin and Debu or Regormado, Q Koran Savin Toto Korakambu Koratani, Debu Moyandrachi or Mardo. Juice Kaya Majura debuting or Semba Draw Me Hesere, Meba, Jun debuting or Poa Melas. Judin debuting or Poa Mebas, I saw in Duke of the Poa Mebas, I can't choose. That is one in my seeing good. Nazu Tanda Nazu posted Kiva post Tanda Midi, Kiva Shimoto Rendora, Tande Midi Garsora, Hard ya posted. Midi Majurja Yardware Sam Kogiara. Dio Mare. The independent Mikona de Tipanga to the Niti, Shushi Pajo de Deputy Kigiara. Tilipe Mambuchan, the Mashi Oli Ungra. Pe Mambuchan Sora. Yine Dawasha de Ora. 아니 그 다외 송년 몸자 마부 추단 시에군데 같은데 그것이 당부 연계 상말을 그 송년 자그라 나와디 되나 슈제 된데 시에게 요 말도 그러나 이게 여네 뒤 깨전에 대부터 버져 타는 거도 되나 시에서랑 아주 교 앞에서 교한디 망가게 그런 거 signe진 더슈르 저르르야 깨운 거라 디페델랑 아주 미치기 쭈르무치 사귀나 쭈르무시비제사나 아 쭈르무시비도서나 퍼조 메디 마상게 칼레 추코야 요세라 코나르고네 쭈무게레요 마라 다이나 코피게 퍼조디 쭈무사 토데 코나 칼라 카주 다요 했던데 요르도 피네 빠제치 된 루요 마라 다네시 칸네 칼럽제 라말라 껴주 상게를 껴주 깜루르 질라베나 셰르 질라베나 셰데나 신당당 버르지 코드 집지 양지 땅 두그라 디코 셰데 콜 펀로게 마르체라 코란디 라라람데 틴 라브지 수케인 거라 데손자 코탄다 제부디 만유르제 딩올 파드레요 마르스 제부디 존르데 디슈긴 퍼조데 제부디 깨운 거레스 데손 거라 포아세데 아주 기시 포아세도 기시 포아세데 단단 아주 소스 미디 민원에란 때네 단도되게서 민원에란 때네 교시만 두비베 나와르 샤고로 어떤데 요 말해서 거라 배드 미팅 줄네 티슈기 치마치마치 깨운 거라 포함해 봐서 대단하야 중간에 균체베 제수 데부 중앙에 야 예랭기 교든가 살 디체수야 데부 로브르도 깨했는데 요 말해서 그런 균트니 온 거라 가바나 뒤냠도 딱 교대 예랭이 교된 가바나 아니 대다 뒤냠도 아니 데부디 깨고래서 상대 도면하셔서 상셔야 요르도 딜에 초치리 잘라 마루스니 지데 야자용으로 지데 마은도로 기내시 초치데 마와다 초치데 토아데 뒤냠으래서 상대 도만이데 킬로자야시 딱 자가는 킬로스를 도와가서는 것이 상스라 상제 상대 도면에서 규된 각보다 냠도는 제부디 깨와래서 뒤냠으래서 상대 도면 주도 제부 깨와 힘배 규단 제부 제발 중앙이노서 예랭이 규대다 텔라 렌지시니 tro셔발 때네 니 규대다 젤네 젤네 레마도 티바로 규럽지 체리야 깨가 말했습니다 어디 봐도 지라 야
So here, then, a cause has the quality of producing the entity of its effect. That's really what we define a cause as. It has that ability to produce that entity of its effect. In other words, it has the property of reaching for its effect. So the only way for a cause to produce its effect is through a gradual process of transformation of the cause. So here, when we talk about like planting a seed and getting a rice seedling, it's based upon the sort of continuity that when we plant that seed and have that substantial cause and then all of the kind of proper coordinating conditions, we can bring about a sprout. The seed sort of holds that potential or the property of reaching for its effect. But when it is combined with the proper sort of coordinating conditions, it can transform into the particular effect. Again, this sort of rice seedling. So here again, given that an effect cannot occur without some aspect of the cause undergoing transformation, there can be no cause that becomes the effect, its effect directly. So here, it is this sort of transformation that leads to a particular result. It's not like the cause itself becomes the result, nor, as we'll see below, is it due to the sort of cutting of the continuum of the cause that then allows the result to come about. But when we think about it, like, for example, when we talk about taking a future life and we think about like, oh, I want to become a god in the future, we sort of almost think that it's like this body or this person that we have now that will become a god, or like the thing that we have right now. But that's not actually the case. The sort of transformation of going from one rebirth to the next is not quite like the sort of way that we imagine it. There are lots of sort of examples of this when we can talk about, and this word sort of transformation is the same word that we use like poa, like when we're moving from one life to another. So we could give examples of like the moon. Just by the moon existing there, it's able to cast a form in whatever sort of reflective surface there might be. It's not as though the moon somehow moves there or somehow gives something to each of those, but rather by its mere existence, it is able to produce those kinds of reflections in everything. Or one could use the example of like, if you see someone who is eating something really sour, even though you don't put that kind of sour thing in your own mouth, just by seeing that other person, you can start to salivate because you see the sort of look on their face of they're having eaten this really sour thing. So again, what is it that really came about and created that salivating in your mouth? We can't talk about that the sort of thing. It's the cause itself becoming the effect. But rather there's this kind of transformation that's really important here. Or for example, one good thing about it too, like if you have something that you are reciting and by you reciting it many, many times, someone else is then able to pick up on that and they can now recite that by heart. What sort of transformation took part there? You didn't give them your words or give them your knowledge or so forth. So anyway, these are some of the ways that we should think about the cause undergoing transformation, because there's no cause that becomes its effect directly. There's a transformation involved. Nevertheless, it is not the case that an effect occurs only after the cause has completely ceased to exist, such that the continuum of the cause has been cut. So it's also not the case that there's this sort of unrelated, the continuum of the cause is cut, and then we have the coming about of the result. But rather it is like the two sides of a scale, when the one side goes down, the other side simultaneously goes up. When the cause ceases to exist, the effect occurs simultaneously. So therefore the effect arises in a way that is linked to the cause. So like we see with a sort of scale, if you're measuring kilos or pounds or whatever it may be, and one side goes up, the other side goes down, this is the same kind of process of transformation, of simultaneity between the ceasing of the cause and the effect coming into being.
Oh yeah. Tena jangba rangi kyujingi tusu rangi ngo nye de kyudu ne hongba ya mayese. Tan jangba de roa rangi kyujingi tusu ko yue ne etine so chanyo wa mare so gordo. Tajin denge to tin dengu doa. Twachil yue ne koran yue ne ngabzo tin ram tongu doa. Sabyo rejini ma shingane yachi ya tayo de koran tene ya tayo ge samsan tengu doa. Kurante dine te rawachen te ya ke mara kyujin soso na ko lubur tu ya te chugo wata. Kana jangba rangi kyujin ji tu su rangi ngo nye te kyudu ne hoa ya ma yi kyudu ne su dina yue ne su ten yo ke mare se. Chi shenda chi ne yo ya ke yo mare se wara. Mahimba rangi keji ki gyurwe kab ki kyun la se nyelen ki kyuche tele lenji chi ki tro che ne Ti kyun dilia ne lubur to ko wangme to su ke yongre es wara. Kyujin soso ne ko lubur to te che yongre no. Kwarsura. Chema lubur dun chonga das. Chema kyujin ki chene ko lubur dia tan yongre chere. Gagba na ya kashe ton ro ma ga do sa shenda jil pa thon ro yo ma res go no. Kyuma dan ra ten jin re bar chonga. Yese Marazu tonal ya chike onde twajine suten yone rudu shenda jin roe sunruji sora yungu orde tina shi mare soko azu na ona shi metemba jumata bure sungu ordo rangi chudan kenje wange wame do keba do wame do gaba imbe chunde je chö kan ya rawa do tuwa metos wame sto chema lubur wasido pena ngarazu tarchere jina sagba gyapsuna yogudo Longba Yuba said, Kocha Rajini Yugumardoya. trouble in Bacha, and if you don't buy your Bashan, Lagbayuna, and a Koyugua. Tarja Korang, you best to Tongo and the Tonda. Koyo Marwa Kujin Sandus and my Luburduko, Yosayan, Kujim and the Kotsu Degdoa. Yaki and Gudwa, or Tinashi, Sishin Lazella Soba, Kujin Sans and Koro Luburto, Rama became where Kujim Masanki Yomara. Oh, this on the core. The Kujingi Wangi, 1 me to Keba, 1 me to Gaba in Beso, Delisgora. So say round of Che Sutake Omar, Kujin Sans and Debu Luburdia Tayongo, Resigordo. 1 me to Gaba in Be, Kunde Yichu Kanaya, round to a message, Rawach and Su Chinetayo at the passion that's on Dret and Deki Omar Resigordo. Then a transgender Chinico Sutu on the Chitsuyane, Pikayan Sutayogora, Kudos. And a part of the Yampa, Chitol Patem to world, Chitso na Pashu, in this Shagor, or Tendeke Maris, Sunguria, Tibatu.
So here, then it continues saying, in this manner, a seedling does not exist at the time of its causes and conditions. That is to say, it does not exist simultaneously with its cause. So when we think about a sprout or a seedling coming into being, it's not something that already existed at the time of the cause, like the sort of self-production or the kind of idea of the Samkhya that the result exists at the time of the cause. And it doesn't arise sort of from itself. It doesn't come from its own kind of being in the way, again, that the Samkhyas assert some kind of self-production. And when we see, say, sprouts arising in a field, it seems like, oh yeah, those seeds are giving rise to those sprouts. There's a sense of their coming from a particular kind of self-arisen cause. But it's not actually the case that they come about in that way. Rather, it is only due to the kind of aggregation of the proper causes and conditions, having that sort of the continuum of that substantial cause affected by various conditions that sort of adventitiously, that those, when they come together, something is produced. And so it continues saying that, moreover, it does not come from somewhere else later on. It's not the case that the effect comes from somewhere other than its particular cause, but rather a seedling is a dependent arising that appears and disappears like a magician's illusion. It arises suddenly, composed from causes at a certain point in the continuum of momentary transformations of its causes, and when it ceases to exist, it does not go somewhere else. So we have this kind of like idea that things seem to be sort of stable and static, but really when we examine causes and conditions, there's no stability, nothing is static, but they're constantly undergoing this kind of momentary transformation. And so when we point to a sort of certain point in the continuum, it's undergoing these kinds of transformations on a momentary basis. So we can point to something and call it a cause and then an effect later on. But here, like when we, for example, see a flag or a prayer flag flapping in the wind, it seems like that flag is sort of flapping on its own. But again, it's only due to the sort of causes and conditions, having the proper wind and so forth. In the absence of that, it's not going to come into being. Here, again, it's impossible for any effect or cause to be established independently. These are mutually dependent. And all transformations within a continuum do not arise and cease on their own, but they do so by the power of their specific causes and conditions. So here, in the collection of causes and conditions, there is a constant change or flux. They are never static. So this is, again, there is no sort of thing, an effect that can exist at the time of the cause, but rather it is something that comes about through this momentary, moment-to-moment kind of transformation due to the aggregate, the coming together of particular causes and conditions.
Oh, yeah, Tena medeba jusen tena sora medeba su keji tambo de nibana ni keji tambo de keji nibe de su medeba sora ran tubdu gi keji niba medeba sora keji cheke ne kon jor she chi yoro tambo de nibe desu tambu na shinche degyo ma yundu yora. Tena medo bar ndrovese. Kechi tambu de, kechi nibe desu majik bar medo bar ndrovese. Yundu desora. Yurwe, kyujin soso wa tuman deba les. Kyujin soso wa mangbuchin deba le tene. Gyurwa am jikba dan dembara. Gyurwa ndronge am kechi ki jikba jik ndronge ge. Gyula tene tende drebu kewa tali ya. Deche ki tende segre ser shiridwa. Gyurwa am jikba dan dembara drebu ndeli chakwa. Gyute dan ndeli ne kengi ene roba cheche. Ko drebu di kewa dwa. Ndeli chakwa kewa duche ke wando chebe. Tenjin drebu na zhunga shekya charunga osa. Yo techi lapsana.
So then again, it is impossible. This in a collection of causes and conditions, there is a constant change or flux. So they are never sort of static. When we think about like the first moment of a rice sprout doesn't remain for more than a moment. It becomes the kind of second moment of that. And so here, again, it says that the effect arises in a way that is linked or connected to the constantly changing continuum of causes. This is then aptly called dependent and linked arising of composite phenomena. So here, it is from this kind of like constantly changing continuum of causes that we can speak about the way that they come about. They're in constant flux. All of these are momentary.
Oh yeah. Tedar salun jangba de se ta tedarwa. Salun jangba de rawa changi rangi keche ba pa tabu enshindu. Ko rawa chene ne cheba bochege kechuya da ma kechuya tende wang chene samlutane ke ati yo mare so tena salun jangba de rawa changi rangi ge cheba bom tabu enshindu. Songenge tabu de. Enshindu ya kyujin tende ke gyurwale Kurang yelen kyudan lenji chige tende to so ne tin gyo chen ya ke wor ma do shenda samlistane ke ku me tende chen yo mare songera tende ge gyuwale ome do ke wa yin las ko lubur to ke wares kyudan ke so de Kurang rawa chen cha ke yo mar ko ba ki ran ji ke ngor no ke ben jangban de ke chi ngama tambo de ke chi ni ber mebe medolas keji tambude keji niba deg marwa keji chime jangba namja ngama ne yeba keji chima de tambu ne yeba marwa tambude niba jigru yara rangi rende keji ngama da rinde keji ngama da ane nyelenge kyu rawa rinde ngama da lenji chige treda sher salum batozul sher sigra treda sher se long so che ne long de ko yo no ya tya lia ke lia long so je kyu jin le lubur sar chon do ke ko ba yin jang be ring de cha ka ya ke se ba ra wa ke ne ba me dos o ti pa de chi kyu ne chi par chi da de
So then similarly, in the same manner, a rice seedling is not produced in isolation, but from the transformation that is the dependent arising of its causes and conditions. Again, no independent divine creator or master of the universe is involved. It's not the case that if all of the causes and conditions are assembled, something needs the sort of divine inspiration or the thought of some kind of divine creator for it to come about. It's a dependent arising that comes from its causes and conditions, and there's no other sort of a divine creator involved. So here too, it says a rice seedling is momentary in the sense that the rice seedling of the first moment has ceased to exist in the second moment of the rice seedling. So the second moment of the rice seedling did not exist previously. It was not, so here, again, it was produced newly and adventitiously from its causes and conditions. That is, from both the preceding moment that is a part of the continuum of a rice seedling moments that similar type, and conditions such as warmth, moisture, and air. So again, the sort of preceding moment that is a part of a continuum of a rice seedling, that's the sort of substantial cause, as well as those coordinating conditions such as warmth and moisture and air, all of those things being necessary to actually produce that particular effect. So it's not the case that a portion of the rice seedlings continuum that has already been produced lingers on, but rather it is newly produced in every moment of that kind of continuum.
Oh yeah. Oh, dandazu danda de karsore. Keji in Jura Chebe, Kulatan and Debucuris, Shaggy or no. O Tandal Tender Redevare, Tisonza Karsore. To do number member to the Mambu or no Shavalia. Oh, it doesn't do Shana. Number and a Keji lies on the Kanga Judo Resade and a Digmaris Segura. Keji in Judo Yon and a Debucatu Maris, Cook and a Keji Chita and a Mavshasara. And Debu Kandesiki orders, Debuke to Jumindoa. Le Jumdela Sobana, Jawangachilla Sobana, Chawa Chevalia, Tuju Godet, and the Keji in Jurachi or Marese. Keji in Jurachi and Chawa Debuke, Chawachi to Marese. Oh, Tilia, Keji in Jurachi and a cocoon tuche, Chichi, Jurchi, and Jurbi, never church and Debuke or Resora. That is a pesha domazo. Lord of China, Lordy, Keji Jigiora. Keji Majina and Lord Roson Dumarwa. Lopen the Tanshaw and the Herde Uda, Herde de Hedegua. Herde Keji in Jurguara, Keji Majuna and Herde Roson Dumar, Penelo. Cokiora, Keji. Twin to each day, Lega Chigdua. Mitoya Petsa lawyer, the Savache, member passe, Mubakanga Savache Chigiora. Chesa Keji in Jurashabina. Could you hear the Tuji? And Debuji Chawachi took with us or the share or no. Chidango Kangako, Tandala, Keji and Joach and get ready order. Joach married Tabang or Tanamado and Dia Carsora. Debuji took Maris or Tender Maris order. Whereas she gave an Leungdo. Sulan Sumbashi, Simji Keji Lesha Mess. Give it Tangy Merik Batana Tiny Sheba question, Garazo Haku Marisa. Not the Sumbachi Tayat, Mission Teora. Tanto Sumbachi Tayate. Keji and Joacha, Sumbachi Tayo and Mato. Nangarang Sumbachi Tayo, some Rawachan Tayaka Yomara. Sulan Sumbashi, Simji Keji Lesham. So the Simji Keji Judo, Tanda Dairy, Yaja, Pen Jurja and Dudoa, or Tinashin. Sim Keji and Jura Nashi. So Sumbatia, Keji and Junia, Sumbo Jago Sigara. Sula Sumbashi, Sumbachi had the Sigorta, Sula Sumbashi. Simji Keji Leshamis. Kay Tangy Mirik Batana, Dani Shebakos. Garazu de Haku Yomaresa, so Haku Yomara, so condition, but net on one. Now, some cousin, Yemani, Tanda Yet, everything, you made the Tanda Yet, Yema, Tanda the Mount, but then get some coda. Kuhidi Yungu Madu, Keji Sora, Udang Gudwa, Ulang Gudwa, Chutong Gudwa, Kalasa Gudwa, Long the Yabuchi Mana, so Togumarto, Lunal to Jajuna. And it's under the Triamadre, Tosamadrine, Santomarwa. So Juji Mambo Shebuji Son, Sa Chu Me Long Namka Tongsa, Ra. You come to the beaches, Sa Chu Me Long Namka, Namshishara. Namga said they called Tongza del Sigara. Namga Tawa said the Sigomare. Pugan Namgase. Whereas Utan said Tongja Korba, Kambina Utan Samani. So Keji in Jodu Yoda. Keji in Jodu Manako, Jusaba Saboyake Marwa. Jusaba Saboyake Yoda. Tochi Madrida Namsachi Redra, Mission with the Memshadwa. Or Tison the Tinashing of Samako, Judan Kenchi, teaching Jurgu and Aras and Jua Ragba de Tongun Mado, Tramatongo Marwa. Migisheba Shingarij in a tongue of Sebachasha, Tayake, with Ragba Tongun, Jua Ragba de Tongure. The Tongan Keji Jurading as Sorgi or Marwa. Ti Tokyo, Kechi Yogi Arestia. Kechi Majunani, Castle Jursen, Chavacheto Maris at the Mara, Kechi Guachani, Chavachegores. Jura Mengage and Legacheto Maris, Tambuda Degra. What is Lamna? Yeah.
So here again, it is in dependence upon kind of momentary causes that we give rise to effects that are similarly momentary. Things are constantly disintegrating moment to moment. There's no sort of static, nothing that can remain in the sense of being permanent and unchanging, but rather causality is such that it is momentary, that things are constantly sort of disintegrating. And so for some non-Buddhists, they would think like, well, how is it possible for things that are momentary like that to bring about any kind of result? How can we possibly talk about karma working or past and future lives or have a sort of continuity of anything if things are momentary, if they're just sort of changing moment to moment to moment? But in response to that, the Buddhists would actually assert that it is only because things are momentary that they can bring about some kind of cause. It is precisely because they aren't sort of static and permanent that one can have efficacy, any kind of result coming from its proper sort of cause. So if we take, for example, like electricity is not something that is static. It is something that is changing moment to moment to moment. But it is the case that we can use electricity to power a light, to turn on a light, and use that light for reading and so forth. And although that is not static, it is something that is changing moment to moment to moment. And the current of electricity that is going to that light bulb is something that itself is momentary and is not permanent or static or remaining in any kind of way. We can still, due to the sort of continuity of that particular result, that light, we can use it to read books and see things and so forth. So here, there is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 about the kind of fact that our life is something that is momentary. Right now, we are alive, and it is only due to being momentary, really, that we are alive. We can see more easily how it is that our mind is changing moment to moment. But we don't have this sort of sense. We don't realize actually the way in which we are momentary. Our life is momentary. So here, we generally, all of us have a sense of kind of like permanence, like we remain the same day to day even. But when we actually sort of look and examine, it is only because of our body and mind being composed of various elements that are themselves impermanent and momentary that we can speak of being alive. We need to have this kind of constant change and movement. We can see that we need to breathe, we need to eat. Even if we say have something like our blood isn't pumping for one moment, we're not able to stay alive. We are composed of these 6 elements, again, those being earth, fire, water, wind, empty space, and then consciousness. Again, so when we talk about empty space, I mean, think about, we need to have the sort of spaces within our body to be able to fill our lungs and so forth. So there's so many various causes and conditions, moment to moment to moment, that are necessary for for us to be alive. Yet we don't recognize that. We don't recognize that we are in fact momentary. We tend to see ourselves as sort of static and unchanging. Now we're maybe able to observe those coarse kinds of impermanence sort of change over a longer duration of time. But really, we don't normally recognize or understand the way in which we are actually changing moment to moment to moment, that we are momentary, and that our very life is only possible because it is momentary.
Oh yeah. Then Salu Jangba so China Jungobo Gang Chiba Tamjeta, Ganga Chiborwa, and the Salu Jangba Sarmato. Rangi Jujin, Chada Cheba, Rangi Junior, Judan, Jen, Leji Chicken, and it's Chada Cheba, Chasha Mambu Youngest or Chame Yomardo, Chada Cheba, and Juroche, Kechi Juruge, Judoshingijan, Juroche, Jujin, not so what to me, so vale, then a Keba in Bess or Debu Condition Kena, Yelena, Leji Chicken, Soba, Juroche. Pewadan dribble sobara, Chawachinge, Duration any debut kekores, Sawachige. Ibe. And China Jungobo Nam Rankewa Nayas, Chingobo in a Nanga Kansa, Gugitive in a Dara, Chino Chitin Sishina Sela Soba, $10 Soba Karinada, Nanga any Kansaga Sola Sobada, Soadan Dushi Lula Soba Kalisha Neduda. China Jungobo Nam Rangi Kewa Naya. Chame Chigandu Kiwa Mesila, Chatani Chijumenge, Kora Chigange, Ranzu Tumli Suke, Yoma Resura, Chirikbe Chatuma Togba Kona Kibese, Koralia Togba de Chasha Mambushi, Nebato Keku Resura, Chasha Chiri, Damada Mambushi, Chirikbe Chatuma Togba Kona Kiwa in Bese, Drebicha Kaya Dashi, Dashi Togbala, Medeshi Madembar. 저전 그 차시 망부셔도 차시 뜻을 때내는 다고로 봐. 행동을 비지네 그 차시 망부여라. 자다 직별로마다 박바다 차시 뜻을 가져가지 요래. 뜻을 때내 안에 내 행동을 해서 다고로도. 강바르지네 차시 망부 그 사바다 자다 망부셔요라. 뜻을 때내 안에 내 강바르에서 다고로 봐. 대참로 강바샤야르마도 뒤는 찍은 전에 강바디르세지 요 말도. Chiribe Chatuma Sokwa Kona Kiwa Yimbe, Drebu Kaya Rangi Dakshi Sokwa Latone, Dakshi Sideko Semble Chare Tambu Chershi Chiwara, Otele Dakshi Sigwara, Pena Koreshi Thompson, Kodi Chershi, or the Campus do some Pada Yorno, Kigureshi Tomba in Edra, or the Yan Toganesi Tor is a Tomba in Edra, Palarishi name Goda Namada. Sura Chicton or the Dirishas Patagua, or the Dakshina, Taksura, Dakshis Tambu Chershiter, Chashimabu Orakora, a teleton on the Panares era, the Mires era Patara. That is some you come me in Bashagur, no? Oh, this way. This was the Dakshila 10 Tapas some shower. Kaya Dakshi Tobala Medushi, Dakshi Tobala 2 Mekuba Madimber, ranking all. Nibe Kugame ranking all the Ratugma Resigurdo. Chashela Tenji, Tapa Samla Shower Mato, Tapa Samaingi, Tenechi saying near what in the Yoma Resingudo. What did you do now?
So then therefore all external and internal composite things, again, rice seedlings, people, thoughts, are produced in dependence on an aggregation of their multiple and varied causes and conditions, which are specific to each thing, composed of parts and ever changing. So here again, whatever kind of thing it is, and we've used an example of like a rice seedling or rice sprout, but whatever sort of internal or sort of external things in the external world, or the kind of internal things, the person, the feelings, and so forth, come about due to an aggregation of causes and conditions. And we have then something that is designated or imputed in dependence upon its basis of imputation. So when these things are produced, whatever composite thing it is impossible for them to be produced as singular partless things. Again, when we have something like, you could take, for example, a tree, we designate tree on the collection of various parts of like a stalk and the sort of bark and the leaves and the branches and so forth. It's not just like one thing. It's rather a collection of various kind of parts that we then designate tree, or like a house. When we designate something as a house, that is the extent of its existence. If you then try to look within those various parts, within that basis of designation, it's impossible to find the thing so designated. So here it says, since any effect is produced only from an assemblage of multiple and varied parts, it is impossible for it to come into being without depending or relying on a collection of parts, which is its basis of imputation. So here this term basis of imputation, like for example, when we have something like a house and the collection of the various walls and windows and all of that, that is the basis of imputation. Or like for a cow or an oxen, you know, the collection of those various parts that we then identify as being a particular thing. So you have the basis of designation, that collection of parts, and then the thing which is designated or imputed on it. So this is only, sort of, again, any effect is produced from an assemblage of multiple and varied parts, and it is impossible for it to come into being without depending or relying upon that collection of parts, that basis of imputation.
Oh yeah. Debu chule tenzu ji kebar sashtuwa. Tangwe mawa tuzuke ne debu chule tenis kesigra tende kelinge toa. De kebar tenjuwa da kebar keme doa siti yungwara. Debu chule tenzu kebars. Ona ngebo mawa namje jasa. Ngebo mawa sude shiriba kanga dorda ngebo temba tuba mawa. Rangwine tuba mawa. Ranga ching temba tuba mawa. Tendamba tuba mawa. Ngwa mawa sigara. Oh, tindaya. Shiriba tan nangbe. Tubdan dote badan ira chita mawa tan semzambala soba tazu yungra. Wana ngabo mawa namye chan drebu kyula tembar debe ase. Drebu di kyula ten gure se kelingir no. Ni kyujin la madebe rangwe tulu meban debe. Kyudan ken la madebe che drebu koran kyanjan daga se kiwa de keling meduase. Rangwa du tuba keling meduase. Te keling marwa. Kyudan mogo che koran rawa kebare de sigmarta. Ta di inan kar sora. Kyangben ba ge inan ya tinde double lagu hara. Kyujin mogo che koran kebare siga. Duche tenden duchu la tengyu ata kebar che keba ke medoa. Kera tende de mamboshe de solution bendola sobe kapso. Ke chimbuche songyo de konzu ke keling do chikbare do asina. Chinase suchaba chugara. Ngobo mawa namgine, ngobo na gyumeba, ngobo mawa tozu kanga, rangune tuba, rangi chanyi tuba, tentamba tuba kelingi wara. Tentamba chi tugure samse chi tang oda gyumene keyon kudusa kura, rangshin keyon nete tentamba tuba rwane. Yana gyumene kene, ngobo na gyumeba kewade. Yana mitebe gyun jigden cheba bola soba, wanju dan, tui chame dan, tui takba dan, tsawe rangshin chi sola soba, tezo keba ese. Tezo temba truba digure, debu kewa de temba truba digura. Kibu takbe gyule kewa deba dan, ya kibu takba shati debu kewa soba. Teda jan su dui shagina, ngo mawa tsoga ya, ngo gyule kewa, chudan kenle tene kewa mawa te su dui na, tashi kewe nalu dui rugure eso gewara. Tiyo rangi tangi chikbe gyule kewe taki se. Tsawa shiraka sune tali mayi, shenle mayi, nile mayi, gyumi mayi, ngubu kanda kane, kiwa nami yo mayi sungudwa. Chacha, chitangbuta taki re shara. Rangda tangi chikbe gyule kewe taki kelingi ware. Ti rangwene truba, tuantambu truba kelingi. Drebu nam rangwene trube gyu shenle kewe shenji se. Shendage, shenji kelingi ware. Rangwene trube gyu shenle tene. Ya tuantambu trube gyu shenle tene, drebu shenji kire ese. Odi shenji sayate, keba tsu yang, keba tsu sungzu mendanyi yora. Keba kasha sonne shenji sayate, gyu shen shana dhiri, tuandam bada tunda chagu maras. Gyu shen lin drebu shen kiwa mayasa, tuandam la chebe se sigora. Gyu shen lin drebu shen kiwa yo maras. Tuandam baki rangwini trube gyu shen li chagu maras sunga. Che zonga bada otazo na rangwini trube gyu shen li kiwa shenji sayate kili ngeba chagu re sunga. Oh, ni kara dagidan drebuna rangune trube gyu shenle kewe shengidan nigale kiwa ta dagi yin shengi yin se chiruba tozo sigardon dagi shengi niga nyelingi gyule kewe shene dagi se lenji yin shenle tene kewe shene shengi se yan dagi shengi dusu toso ragidi mdwa nigale kiwa yin ser gyu meba chirile kiwa ndoba yan kyangbi bayane gyu mene Kora Rangshin Jitsu, Rangune Sutang Gorsigora. Jutedal Drebu Kevetsu, Mirunga Kondo Shesin Badar Yimbes, O Tende, Rangune Trube Jushenda, Tagi Shangi Niga Jumile Kiwa Shinal Mandibe Kiwa Homar, Tishigadi, Tondamba Tuba Rangune Trube Sugi, Kiwa Kailing Giwarese. Ngamawe Drebu Chula, Temper Mawa, Dranas, Drebu Chula Teni Keda Sigro. Maya Tadagan do Sunam, Timbe Judan Kenla Tene Kive, Tenchidar Tula Neba, Shin Joshi Batadal Medus, Tandal Wone Sene Kechi Jurochin Gen, Roa, and then Ramwine Trube Tombe, Rawando Trube Sugi Meba, Attended Kiwate Shashin Guamaris, Ramwine Chike Wudu Satundamba, Kyo Yogure, some Kasha Dagi, Kasha Shengi, Nigalika, Jumilika, the Kelling Goresha. Tadagan Duzu Namla Timbe Kula Ten and Drebu Keve, Tenchidar Tola Nebashi, Titala Meadows, or Consul Joshi, but the Consul Yomaris, Ya Tibatilla, Manduchasa.
So then here we turn to this section on different interpretations of how an effect depends on its causes. So it says here that since even essentialists, so those who say that the identity of individual phenomena relies on their possessing a fixed essence or nature, assert that effects arise in dependence on their causes, they must ultimately deny any mode of existence that is independent of causes and conditions, just as consequentialists do. So here again, essentialists are those that say that the identity of individual phenomena relies on their possessing a fixed essence or nature. This can take on various forms, but even within the Buddhist schools, we see like the particularists or like the Vaibhashikas, the Sutra school, the mind-only school. They assert a dependent origination, but they also assert this kind of fixed identity or true existence. And so someone might have this kind of question, well, just like the consequentialists assert dependent origination, so too do those essentialist schools. So how do consequentialists differ from essentialists with respect to their understanding of the dependent arising of composite phenomena? So here, again, there are different sorts of views that are taken by these essentialists. Different essentialists make various assertions with regard to composite phenomena. Some say that things arise causelessly. So there are those, again, like the Charvakas or those types of sort of hedonist kind of schools that believe things arise causelessly. Whereas others assert various discordant causes, such as a divine creator, a partless particle, a permanent principle called time, a principle nature, or a permanent being. So all of those sort of positions can be subsumed into these four alternatives. This, again, being production from self, that effects arise from causes that are the same nature as themselves. Production from other, effects arise from causes that exist in and of themselves. Production from both self and other, and production from no causes. So here, again, those sorts of essentialists would assert that production needs to fall into one of these four. We see there are those that assert like self-production, like the Samkhyas and so forth, or things coming from a sort of principal nature and dissolving back into that. And there are others who would assert that there is a production from an other, an inherently existent other. Now, this, again, is sort of refuted by the famous line from Nagarjuna's Fundamental Verses on Wisdom, where he says that there's nothing whatsoever that arises from self, from other, from both self and other, or from neither self nor other. So here we should take that and understand that as refuting all four of these kinds of types of production. Now, there are those who would say that one needs to apply the kind of qualifier of ultimately. They would say that things are produced from another, but not an ultimately existent other. Now, for Lama Tsongkhapa, he really applies that kind of qualification of an other, things are not produced from an other that exists from its own side. Here, again, none of these four modes of production are accepted as valid, even without the kind of qualification of ultimate, although from its own side. So, that production of effects via these four alternatives is unfeasible, has already been explained above. Therefore, although essentialists say that effects arise in dependence on their causes, they do not, in fact, assert how effects do arise, how they arise from causes that are concordant with them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they tanda disungda, chezonga tanda. Chiriba to Zuta, Chiriba to Zuta, Basanje Chumdende, Cokeling Mardo, oh, Sanje da Takba Meba Songi Sarah, and it you didn't sheba bola so what is a Meba Songisa. And it's Gabokanga, Kiji Sarah, Tezukonzo, Kavio Mardo, Shende Baside, Kavio Marta. Oh, Tezogi, any Ranshime. Rangshiki meba de mesone sema to na rangshiki yore tamba yore tamba tuba yore sede kurazu tembe lure kamendu songo yora chesonga ba ki tendre jeba ne gudo gangshi kyodan shenje ba mare tambude mongbe chando sonwa yesara mongbe chando sonwa yesa ko ta yo sarwa ta ge nesula mongba jiden jeba be nesula mongba ta mongba mambu yordo kanga no riche mongba Mongba ge shanwa de son yogbu na shi cha de sha song go ra zhe na shi mongbe zhan de song ai gan shi kyo da shen de ba dan ba sang ge chum de kyo da shen de ba se pe ko ka wo yo ma shen o ta de nastic wala de se ta ta kwa me se ge ni chi de che ba me se ge ta kwa me tu ta kwa me se ge se nastic wala se do me ba ma wa de se gan shi kyo da mongbe zhan de song ai gan shi kyo da shen de ba te rangshi mebe cha meso gyula sarchi yose. Konzo ke rangshi me se de soe togu maare se rangshi yore, tamba yore, tamba tuba yore si gora. Tila ngo sare ke yo maare, yam tsanye ke yo maare, koran se tembe lure si gora. Meso gyula sarchi yose. Ta dile duwa de, chitra mawa dan tode pa dan sem zamba tozo. Tamba sanje chomde deke chinju re si gora. Tanda tezuge, misegule, kyoji songi jeben zu, tenen zhuwa kaya nes. Sanje chumden de songbe, songi zu da ube sa shushu, yoge, tenjin rebar zhuwa yisi, kaya langi la si gordo. Kyoji songi jeben zu, tenen zhuwa kaya nes. Tongyi ngaru mesuba tela kongo zagyo. Rangshingi chube tongba re si, ti mesu ni rangshingi yu si kaya langi de, tongyi ngaru mesu tela kongo zagyo, de yamchenbu re si.
So here, then again, those who are following after, again, there are outsiders who don't accept the kind of system presented by Buddhists. They don't accept the idea of selflessness or that there is no creator and so forth. So for those who are really outside of the system of the Buddha's teachings, as Gelama Tsongkhapa has said in his verses on the praise of dependent origination, being enslaved by ignorance, those who fiercely oppose you, what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence? So those kinds of schools that assert that there is some kind of intrinsic existence, or they are really enslaved by their various views that are totally in opposition to the views of the Buddha, it's not really astonishing that they are unable to bear the sound of there being no intrinsic existence. It's not something that they can really fathom or get behind. But But continuing into the next verse, he then addresses those who claim to be followers of the Buddha, but yet are not able to accept emptiness. So here it continues saying, but having accepted dependent origination, like those lower schools, the Vaibhashikas, the Sutra school, the mind-only school, the precious treasure of your speech, this thing that is so precious, that is like a treasure of the Buddha's speech, having accepted that dependent origination, then not tolerating the roar of emptiness. This I find amazing indeed. So it is more sort of strange or amazing that those who accept the idea of dependent origination are there not able to bear with the idea of emptiness. This is sort of, that is something that he's expresses his amazement at.
我也得操作了，好嘞。哦呀，他这说呢，就是操作啊，这个。
So we will stop there for today as we've run out of time.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice in that long life, may I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah, well, teacher.
Thank you so much, Gen Rinpoche, for such beautiful, profound teachings. And thank you, Christina. Without you, we would not, Katrina, sorry, without you, would not be able to understand a word of this beautiful teaching. So thank you, and we'll see everyone next week.